Welcome to the Live Better, Sell Better podcast with your host, Kevin Dorsey of Inside Sales Excellence, the #1 Patreon group and YouTube channel for tech sellers and tech sales leaders, where we dive in deep for tactical advice on how to book more meetings, close more deals faster, and lead sales teams to success. But we don't stop there. We also focus on the person in salesperson. We talk about mindset, goals, time management, and so much more. So thank you for listening. And if you're interested, head on over to patreon.com/inside sales excellence. Now with that, grab a notepad, get ready, and let's dive into the good stuff. What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Live Better, Sell Better podcast. This is your host, Kevin Dorsey, aka KD, and I'm going to start with a bold statement. Numbers don't lie, but salespeople do. So one of the things that I have experienced in my career, right, is this idea around is SaaS a numbers game? And so often when you ask people this question, there's a hesitancy to say yes, when in reality, the answer is yes. But what people forget is behind every number is a person, a behavior, a process, and a skill. And what great leaders are able to do is not talk about what the numbers are, but how to change the numbers to get the results that they're looking for. And that is why I am so pumped to have Peter Kazanjy on the call with me today. He is the co-founder at Atrium, the data-driven sales management tool. And he and I speak the same nerdy data-driven language when it comes to sales and sales leadership. So we're going to be getting into the numbers, but also more importantly, how to change them. Peter, my man, welcome to the show.
You nailed it, man. Preach. I'm just going to sit here silently while you just like proselytize. I love it. It's amazing.
I'm told the only reason guests show up to the show anymore is just for the intro. They're like, I just want to hear the intro about me and with me, and then I'll deuce out from there. So here's where I'm going to start, man, with the question is, you get to look at a lot of companies. I have been blessed to lead quite a few, but now I'm consulting a lot of companies. And it still is actually shocking to me how undata driven a lot of companies are. So I actually want to open with this into why do you think that is? What seems to hold companies and leaders back when it comes to leveraging and using data?
Yeah. I think that it's just a new thing, man. It's just a new thing. And new things take time for people to get good at them. Look, you have a substantial background in competitive athletics and coaching and what have you. And the same sort of stuff went down in, the advanced, kind of professional athletics and is now permeating down to college and high school and so on and so forth. But just back in the day, you didn't have the data capture in order to do sweet analytics on, basketball or football or soccer or whatever. But now that you do, but now you need the humans who can interpret that. Right. And the same is true, use the Golden State Warriors as an example, right? When we were doing research for Atrium early on, back in 2016, I actually interviewed the head of analytics at the Golden State Warriors, right? And this is back in the day, and it was so funny. He was like, "Oh yeah, we're doing all this great stuff," and I was like, "Okay, well, where do you guys use it? Do you use it to coaching in the game, etc.?" He's like, "No, the coaches don't let us do that." He was like, and I was like, "Well, what do you guys?" He's like, "Yeah, well, we do it in training and we use it in recruiting." Now, again, this was 6 years ago, right? And it was because the graybeards on the coaching staff or whatever at that time were kind of I don't know, get out of here with your math, kid, go kick rocks. And so it's just it's a process over time. This is what we see in our customer base is oftentimes the younger managers, right, who came up with Whoop and came up with Fitbit and came up with Peloton and what have you. They're way more open to this and they're way more data native. Then you have the older folks who are okay, I got to get on the train. But then you just have people who are okay, you're never going to change and you're just going to have to retire. Yeah, so it's just a process.
I feel like when you told that story for the Golden State Warriors that half the people in RevOps they felt that in their chest where it's here's the data. But we're not going to use that data. That's all I could think of. It was hey, we did some analysis. Go. This isn't art. It's not a science. Get out of here.
Get out of here. Get out of here, nerd.
Um, it's interesting because, as I've gone through this, there are things that I was like, I just figured these were basics. I just kind of thought like everybody tracked some of these things. And that actually wasn't the case to your
Yeah.
point, right? Like, and so if you think about like people listening going, well, man, I don't actually know if I'm data driven. What are some
Mhm.
telltale signs? Like, what are some signs of like, hey, you're using data the right way in your org?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing there is like to your point earlier about like it's not about the numbers, it's about using them to identify shortfalls and areas of outperformance and then change behaviors and like coach appropriately, because it's like having access to data like a wall of charts just for shits and giggles is like it's not useful, right? Like we're here to say, hey, SDR, you are not multi-threading sufficiently. Like, and I know this because the number of contacts you're engaging on a per account basis is substantially smaller than the other SDRs in the team. I need you to put time on your calendar to then do blah 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 blah, right? Like I need you to select up like at least three contacts that you're going to engage per account that we're going after, and I want you to like email me at the end of the day every time you do it, or whatever. Like it's the changing the behavior. So then the question is like, okay, well, like how do you do that? And so usually what that means is like having an operating rhythm, right? Like, and we all have our operating rhythms, like, team meeting on Monday, and we got our, stand-ups on, I'm like, talk about SDRs first, right? Maybe we got our morning stand-up, we got our noon stand-up or whatever, and then we got our one-on-one, maybe a half-hour one-on-one, like every 2 weeks or what have you. Cool, so there's your operating rhythm. Is there metrics in that? Right? Like, are you looking at stuff like in your prep? Like as an example, I have this like, my team meeting Google Doc has like a template at the top, and I just like clone it out, right? It's just like, okay, cool. Like what were the wins from last week? What were the metric outcomes? And then it's also information like what new product shipped, what does CS want to have, the AE team or the SDR team know about? But then littered all throughout is just like a bunch of hyperlinks to various reports and various dashboards. And the same is true with like in one-on-ones as well. So I think the important, like, that you're data driven when you're starting to weave this information into your operating rhythm. And if you're not, then it's probably a good indicator, right? Like if it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I guess like now is the time that I need to go over to that dashboard, right? Like, if it's not like on
Mm-hmm.
your calendar and it's not woven into your rhythm, it's not going to happen, right? Just like in sports, right? Like, after the game, we've got film review, right? And like, after, and then like, go perform, like, and then maybe what we do is we like look at stats on I forget, Katie, what was, you're a baseball guy, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Or was,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Like, I mean, I was a pitcher growing up, and so like as a pitcher, like when you're not pitching, what you would have to do is you would do stats on all the other pitchers, right? And then we would review it on, at Monday practice. So again, it was just like in the rhythm. And if it's not, like, this is probably a good place to start. Is just like start putting in the rhythm, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the call out there of like, putting it where people are, right? So in one-on-ones,
Yeah.
in the team meetings, in the huddles,
Hmm.
because funny enough, and I know
Hmm.
when I first started saying this to my manager, I was like, my manager's on my team. I was like, I don't stop talking about results with me. I know the results. I have the dashboard. I need you to
Right.
talk to me about what's causing the results. And so with the team too,
Hmm.
we had one slide with the results. Here's where we're at with revenue. Here's where we're at with pipeline. We spent
Sure.
most of the time talking about the metrics behind them. What are the
Yeah, the
drivers,
inputs.
right?
Hmm.
Okay, revenue's low. Why? Pipeline's
Hmm.
up. Why? And what I would
Right.
tell my leadership team is if you can't tell me why from a data perspective something improved, you're getting
Hmm.
lucky. I need you to know
Right.
why, right? And so what we joked about is like, don't bring me the data. I want the diamonds in the data. Like I want the diamonds in there. Like what's the good stuff coming out of this? And so if you think about a revenue org, we're going to get very straightforward here. What are some of the key metrics they have to be tracking? Like if you think about a revenue org from top funnel down, what are some of those key metrics that an org should be tracking at a team, org, and individual basis?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny that you're I actually have these like metrics driver like cheat sheets
Oh, let's
sitting next to
go.
me on my desk here. We actually we just like give them out to people. I forget that you can actually find them on Atrium's website. You can just like grab them on there. But yeah, I mean, I think so like we can start with the SDR team first. I mean, I think the first thing first there is like there's varying levels of maturity, and so like if you're not very mature right now, the important thing is to like not overthink it and instead just kind of like start, right? So like use an SDR organization as an example. Probably the most simplistic things that you would want to be paying attention to there would be like, yeah, raw activity level. So like, call volume, email volume, things like that. In addition to that, you would want to be paying attention to unique number of accounts that are being interacted with, right? Unique number of contacts, because this is where people can kind of get tripped up is by doing tons and tons of activity, not across enough at bats, right? Not enough accounts. And then and those are kind of be like the table stakes, and of course your outputs, right? Like opportunity creation or meeting creation or whatever it is that you are kind of KPIing on there. Then one of the non-obvious things that people really get kind of tripped up on is not sufficiently paying attention to net new accounts interacted with or
Mm,
net new contacts interacted with, right? And so because oftentimes what can happen is SDRs can it's like stale accounts, right? They can have their couple hundred or like their couple hundred accounts that they're going after, and they can just be like it's kind of like flogging a dead horse. And so what you want to make sure is that there's like ongoing inflow that's going on there. So like new accounts that are being interacted with, new contacts that are being interacted with. So those are all like quantity metrics right there.
mhm.
And then I think you were kind of mentioning earlier, oftentimes people kind of get like wrapped around the axle, like, oh, it's an art, etc. You can't like, you can't measure my style here. You actually can,
Yes, you
right?
can. Absolutely, you can.
Yeah, there's quality metrics, right? And so oftentimes people kind of just like more volume, more volume, more volume, more activity, etc. But what you want to make sure, like the success in sales is all about a high quantity of high quality selling behavior. And so there's also a number of metrics that are really important in order for characterizing the level of quality of the of the behavior in question. So again, going back to SDRs, those would be things like email reply rate, right? And that's like a good echo. It's like it's not actually like measuring the quality directly, but it's like an echo of the qualities. Because if somebody has an email reply rate problem, that could mean a variety of things. It could mean that they're not selecting good contacts, right? They're targeting bad people. It can mean that their subject lines are poor because they're not getting opens. It can mean that their messaging is poor because they're not eliciting response. It can mean a variety of things, but it would indicate that there's something off there. So that would be an example of a quality metric. And there's others as well, like the ratio between opportunities created and the number of accounts that are interacted with. Is somebody just like spraying and praying and not getting anything to boil, right? Like is your batting average low? And then a last kind of quality metric that I really like is the number of activities that somebody that is required by an SDR in order to create an opportunity, right? So it's a
Mhm.
measure of efficiency. And some of those are more simplistic and some of them are more complicated. One of the things that we really like here at Atrium, like this is why we've invested so much time and energy in making it take like 3 minutes to turn on an Atrium account and have access to like over 100 KPIs that are really impactful for SDRs and for account executives, because a lot of times people are like, man, I really want to do those things, but like, God, that sounds like a lot of work. And also like my RevOps team is like totally underwater and like they keep telling me that they're going to give me these things, but they never get around to it. So that's on the SDR side. On the AE side, I mean, it's kind of like a similar situation, right? Where
Mhm.
again, the kind of raw volume that you would want to be paying attention to there, and this is kind of like contingent on sales motion, but is the like the the AE equivalent of an SDR of like the SDR's email or calling is the meeting, right? Like the fundamental unit of 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 like, selling behavior by an account executive is a customer facing meeting. So starting with that, making sure that you're having, like you're measuring the number of meetings that are happening, measuring the number of opportunities that are in pipe for a given, for like how loaded they are, because oftentimes what people do is they pay attention to the pipeline, like the amount of pipeline that folks have. That's important,
Right.
but like the number of ops that are like on their plate, are they too high? Are they too low? Usually people will say that they're too low, but they can be too high as well. And then it's a similar, and then measures around like, are people working those ops, right? So like number of touches on ops on a, on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or what have you. And then like those are all the like really 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 basic ones, and then you kind of have like the similar thing around inflow, right? So are people having new ops that are flowing into their pipe, kind of like the equivalent of engaging with new accounts? Are people having new ops that are coming into their pipe, or are they having like stagnation there? And then on the quality front, like obviously win rate is the most important kind of like metric there. But then you can kind of get more granular there and say, hey, are people engaging? Like, are they sufficiently multi-threading in their accounts, right? Like, how many contacts are they engaging on a per account basis? That obviously is also important for SDRs. What are the conversion rates between stages?
There you go.
Um, right? Especially like once you have like north of 5 account executives who are doing the same sales motion, then you start having like enough data or enough sample where you can start like comparing people and can say, oh, okay, like this guy right here, he's got like a problematic conversion rate out of proposal as compared to everybody else. Like he's way lower. Man, he's probably like not respecting, he's probably like not respecting exit criteria there. And he's getting things into, he's putting things into proposal way prematurely, which of course is going to like screw up your forecasts and all sorts of other stuff there, right? So those are kind of like the more sophisticated measures there. Again, these are the sort of things that like, our customers really like the fact that you can just turn it on and it's like ready to rock, because a lot of these things are, pretty much impossible to create in, in Salesforce reporting or in BI, unless you have like a full blown data team, in which case, like, good luck getting their time. So those are some
Yes.
of the metrics to kind of pay attention to there.
No, and I think it's so important as he's going through those, y'all, as you're listening, it's important to have those, but you also want to make sure you're breaking them down for the individual and the team. Because I
Yeah,
see
exactly.
because I see a lot of one of my favorite data quotes now that I've been using more and more is the average man does not exist.
Yes.
And I
We,
love
we
using this. Go for it.
yeah. Well, we say a similar thing. We say like averages lie because they
Yes.
hide things.
They
Yeah,
hide
I
it.
love it. Keep going.
They
Yeah.
hide it because if I have a team of 30 and the average
Yep.
close rate is 30%, how many of those 30 actually have a 30% close rate? You're
Yep.
lucky if it's 1 to 2. You're going to have above and below, and yet teams
Hmm.
run off the averages all the time.
Preach.
And it drives me nuts. And I'm sure like this could get dangerous because we are both very passionate about this, where it's like you hear people and like, okay, you need 3x pipeline coverage. And I say,
Right.
how do you know? They're like, well, that should be enough. You go, well, okay, so 3x only works if your close rate is 33% and your deal size is proper. So do you know those numbers?
Hmm.
And it's like, well, of course not, right? And so it's just hilarious to me, like because the averages will trip people up, and I want to spend on there. There was just
Hmm.
two metrics that you didn't mention on the SDR side, and I know you were saying a little bit higher level that I did want to call people out is the connect rate and conversion rate. Those
100%.
quality metrics of like, okay, how many dials does it take to get someone on the phone? And then
Yep.
every
Yep.
time I get someone on the phone, what's that
Does it flip?
conversion rate to
Yep.
like the meeting? And there's that quality, that art
Hmm.
measurement again around
Yeah.
it.
It's a win rate. It's like, did you win the call?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the SDR win rate metric, right? It's like, hey, I
Yeah. Exactly.
got
It's
Peter
awesome.
on how many do I need to get to that yes and go through it, right?
Hmm.
Because as if we look at the flow, it's like, you have your results. Great. Results have already happened. Those are in the past. I can't change those. Metrics are the leading indicator to a result, and behaviors are the leading indicator to a metric. And so where I want
Yep.
to take this next is like, okay, I start getting this data. what do I do with it? Because
Yeah.
you see this, actually, I know you see this more than I do. You'll talk to these teams and they have this data,
Yeah.
but nothing's being done. So like, how do I
Yep.
work with the data to actually then make improvements?
Yeah. And that's where this is why, like, I mean, this is why what at Atrium we call ourselves a data-driven sales management solution, because it's not about, like, I kind of hate the A word, like analytics,
Mm.
because it's like, oh, that's for like analysts to do analysis over there, versus like, nah, bro, like we're here to manage. We're here to manage. We're here to coach, right? And it's a mechanism. This is something that helps us a lot, like helps us do that better. And so then the question is like, okay, well, what we need to be doing is we need to be having coaching conversations and doing the work of management, right? Like that's why
Yes.
we earn the big bucks, right? And so what that means is there's a couple great books that I really enjoy on this topic. There is Corey Bray and Hillman Sori's Five Secrets of the Sales Coach. I really enjoy. Does a good job talking about, like, having a coaching rhythm. We talked about this earlier about making sure that there's data involved in that, but you can have all the data you want, but if you don't say like, hey KD, so here's the, hey, good to see you, man. Fresh hat, love it. So I was preparing for our one-on-one today, and I was reviewing our metrics, and I noticed that you had this the number of contacts that you're engaging on a per account basis is a little light as compared to your peers. Do you have a sense of what might be driving that, right? Now we're having a coaching conversation that is informed by data, right? I'm not coming off the top rope and I'm like, oh, get out of here, like, you're the worst or whatever. But we're
Right.
now having a coaching conversation like, oh, I didn't, I am? Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I had no idea. Bob, who sits next to me, told me that that's the way that you're doing. Oh, got it. So maybe I need to refresh you on the rules of engagement, where we have an SLA in our organization where when you pull an account into your name, you're supposed to select, 3 to 5 contacts out of Zoom info before you start going, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Hey, great. Okay, awesome. Well, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask you to go ahead and do that for the next week. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back together, right? Like, because we got this metric right here, and like I'm going to put it in the calendar invite. We're going to come back to, like, and I'm going to ask you to go ahead and hit this hyperlink a couple times throughout the week. Take a screenshot of it and go ahead and Slack it to me. Okay. Okay, cool, man. Like, I'm on it. We just had a coaching conversation, right? A data-informed coaching conversation where we diagnosed a potential issue. We co-created a solution, like we investigated what the issue was, and then we came up with a proposed solution, and a timeline on which to fix it,
Yes.
right? And so I think the challenge is, like, the first step is like doing the data piece. The second step is like having the coaching conversation. And because, I mean, you see this all the time, man. You get a lot of, especially like SDR teams, a lot of like first time managers, 26 years old, 28 years old, oftentimes managing people who used to be their peers. It can kind of like make people clench. And so this is why one of the things that we saw this across our customers, and we realized that there was an opportunity for us to just like help them better manage their teams, like get better at management. So we actually work with, I'm sure you know Richard Harris. We actually work with Richard Harris to we have a monthly manager boot camp that we just make available to our to all of our customers, and actually we make it available to the community too. If anyone wants to sign up, it's just at atriumhq.com/bootcamp. Because often, like, new managers don't get coached on coaching. I know it's kind of meta, right? But they don't get like taught how to have those kind of like coaching conversations and hard conversations. And it's not hard for like old fogies like you and me, because we've been doing it forever, but it's tough for some folks. And if they don't have the muscle, then like the behaviors aren't going to change, and the behaviors aren't going to change, and then like the outputs are not going to change.
No, and I love that because it fits right in with what how my leadership teams, how we run. So the managers reported up to me the number one metric per rep and what they were doing
Mm,
about it. Right.
there you go.
That was what the manager one-on-one structure looked like. Like we cover our team performance and all that, but then what they were reporting up. Okay, Peter, number one metric holding him back from his number is connect rate. And then what are
Yep.
you doing about it? And then we actually built
Yep.
out
Coaching plan.
an entire issue diagnosis chart. So metric by
Love it.
metric, what to look for. And what's funny
Mm,
is every leader listening right now, you already have these checklists. They just live in your
yeah.
head, right?
Yeah, in your
If
brain.
if I if I just I could bump into you at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning after 5 pints and go, hey, I have a rep who has a low close rate. And you'd be like, have you looked at this? Have you looked at you already have a
Yeah, exactly.
checklist.
What's the decision tree? Yeah, it's in your
And
brain.
and so we mapped it out. And what that also allowed us to do
I
is
love
the
it.
the reps could use it too. So the example you gave earlier.
Mm,
So hey,
yep.
Peter, going to dive into our one-on-one, looking at our numbers. The number one issue we're running into, it looks like, is conversion rate. So go through the issue diagnosis chart beforehand and come ready to talk to where you think we need to focus to bring that conversion rate up. So now we were using it on both sides, literally metric by metric. There's like an 18-page
I
checklist
love it.
process, but it helped narrow the focus down, like to get it done.
Yep. Yeah, because otherwise you can kind of feel like you're like lost in the woods, like, oh my God, what could it possibly be? Versus like, yo, okay, cool. Hey AE, you've got like it looks like you got a win rate problem here. Oh, okay, cool. Well, like what could be the upstream causes of that? Well, okay, well, like let's look at your pipe hygiene. Like what's our untouched op situation? What's our stuck op situation look like? It actually looks like pretty clean. That's interesting. Okay, cool. Like you're on top of your stuff, so that's good, right? Like not like Bob over there, man. His pipeline is like pig
Bob.
pen, right? All right, cool. So let's look at something else. So if it's not a pipe hygiene problem, let's go ahead and look at the conversion rates out of like our various stages here. Ooh, oh, it looks like we're not getting stuff out of disco. Huh, interesting. Well, let's go ahead and listen to like 5 of your disco calls here. Oh, okay, cool. So you see at the end of the call there how you're not like scheduling a next step, how you're not making a contract with them for a next step, and you're not getting it on the calendar there, and instead you're following up via email. That's the problem. That's the problem right there. So hey, do me a favor here, Frank. I want to make sure that like when you exit, I want you to watch the clock when you're on your calls, right? And I want you to stop the call when there's still like 5 to 7 minutes left in the call, right? And I want you to establish next steps right there, and I want you to get a next meeting on the calendar right then and there. Can you do that for me? Yeah, I can totally do that for you. Okay, wonderful. So I want you to do that, but then also what I want you to do is I want you to grab those clips out of Chorus or Gong, right? After you're done, and I just want you to flip them to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? At the end of the day, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to stripe a half hour on your calendar at like from 5 to 5:30, and you're just going to grab those for me because now you know you're committed,
Yes.
right?
And I,
You can't just tell me.
I love that. I was just going to call this out again. And I want y'all to go back and listen every time he goes into coach mode. I want you to listen to what he does in coach mode because it's this wasn't a coaching conversation session, but like it's a master class of specifics, right? Backed by data, non emotional, but I also want y'all to catch he's
Yeah,
always asking for some sort of action and call it
yeah,
inspection, where it's like, okay, this is what
yep,
you're going to do. You're going to send me a couple of these calls. You're going to click
yep,
on this link. You're going to
hmm
end the call at a certain point, right? And send
hmm
in the proof because that's
yep,
always the thing around this too is like, and I would talk to my managers about this. I can tell whether you're doing it or not based off if the metric changed.
yeah,
Did this improve month over month? No, then I already
yep,
know either we gave the wrong direction or not. But I want y'all to listen because I love there's always something that needs to be done to show progress, not just waiting to
yeah.
see at the end.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that managers kind of get kind of hung up on is especially like new managers because we you get this with AEs too. It's like I call it the like little old me, like the little old me problem. It's like, but I'm just like little old me. Like I'm just little old me. Like what do I know, right? It's like no, man. Like you do know, right? Like you do know. So and like that's important. And that's why you're the manager, and that's why you're the leader, and so like use it, and moreover, oh okay, well like I'm just little old me, and then moreover also like oh I don't know, that's like micromanagerial to like tell them to do this specific thing. No, dude, that's your
It's
job,
the job.
right? Like I Yeah, I mean, this is why, like, when we first started hanging out, and I saw your background, in kinesiology and what have you, like, this is the thing that like drives me insane. Is people talk about like micromanagement or what have you, and I'm like, micromanagement, like, so when Tom Brady comes off the field and like goes and like sits down next to Bill Belichick and they like, talk about like the last like series right there, oh, like, oh, the greatest the greatest quarterback of all time oh, he's being micromanaged right there. No, he's not.
Oh,
He's just getting better, right? We're just trying to win
dude,
here,
it
right?
it drives me nuts. Actually, I just had a great conversation with J.R. Butler. He runs a recruiting firm that focuses on athletes, and we were talking about this a little
Oh,
bit.
wow.
Like it focuses
Yeah.
100% on collegiate athletes, getting them into sales. And we talked about this, and I was like, if
Hmm.
athletes actually brought that mindset into their sales career, they'd be untouchable. They'd be untouchable. Can you
Yeah.
imagine even in high school, forget college, even in high school, if you showed up to practice and told your coach, "Nah, I'm not going to." Your coach said, "Hey, we're running
Yeah.
laps." You said, "No, I'm a top performer. I'm not going to." Or even worse, "No, I just ride the bench, so I'm not going to." We would never do that
Yeah.
to our coach in sports, but it happens all the time in sales leadership.
Yeah.
And so actually I want to, this kind of sets up a question here. How
Yeah.
can I start to ingrain this? So you mentioned earlier, like, put it where people are, right, in one-on-ones, in team meetings. But like, how do I
Yeah.
start to create a data-driven org? Because it's one thing for you to be data-driven or another thing for me to be
Yeah.
data-driven, but like, how do I get my team kind of bought into this mindset? How do I get my managers bought in where we're starting to leverage
Mhm.
this more often?
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes to, it's related to what you were just saying earlier about, like, you would never, on a, on your baseball team or on your football team or whatever, like, one, you would, like, there's a culture, right, an expectation. You would never, like, when the coach says like, oh, okay, cool, like, I was a pitcher, I also played like third base, right? So it's like, hey, look, like, you're not getting your butt down, right? When you're taking grounders. I need you to get your butt down, right? Like, and like, you would be like, cool, thanks. Awesome.
Right, right.
I'm tired of those grounders going between my legs. Like, wonderful, right? But like, there's just an expectation there. And I think the reason why is because like people come up through that and it's like, yeah, that's what coaches do. And like, that's what I do as a player. And so what you have to do is you have to infuse that culture in your organization. So you have to have a culture of coaching. And what that means is like kind of putting it in the water,
Mm-hmm.
right? Making sure that you're infused with it, and then do the same thing with data as well. I'll give you some examples of this. So one of the things that we have our new account executives do, because like oftentimes like people are so like they clench before they coach. They're like, oh, I don't know if I want to. Whereas if you just like if you're constantly doing it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, oh, hey, like that was a good email there, but did you notice that you like didn't like the formatting was confusing here and you didn't bold your call to action here? And in fact, like you put the ask at the bottom instead of the top of the email, right? That's like a very small coaching conversation that you can have with an account executive to make them more effective in like their email communication, right? So then how do you have those more frequently? How do you have opportunities for that and engender that? So one of the things that we do in our organization, we actually have this email list that we call sales engineering, and the account executives, because we only have 15 account executives only. It's actually kind of a lot now, Pete.
There you go.
We had like 4 a year ago, so I'm like, oh yeah, we only have 15 account executives. I mean, it's nothing compared to Patient Pop, right, bro?
Right.
But what we do is we have this email listserv called sales engineering. And what the AEs do is they just CC it, and management is on there, right? And it's just that like you don't read every email, right? But it's just like an opportunity to kind of like dip in, right? It's kind of like the coach walking around, like watching drills that are happening, and you just kind of see right there, like, oh, okay, cool. Like, Pete, you need to get your butt down because like XYZ, or like, hey, you know what, KD, like you're coming off first, like you need to be a little bit crisper, coming off the bag there. And so like by engendering more opportunities to have these coaching behaviors, one, like you have more at bats, and then it's just in the water, like, oh, that's what we do here, we get coached, like it's okay, it's like it's not because I'm a bad human being and I'm like dumb or something that like Pete or Sean or Melina or whoever is like giving you some coaching feedback on your email, or overheard your call or what have you. And then the other thing too is that when we see particularly good examples, both like opportunities for coaching and also like good exemplars, we make sure to like broadcast it very quickly. Like, hey guys, this is a great example of this right here,
Yeah.
right? Oh, hey everybody, see how there was this boo-boo right here? Like, this is the right way of doing it. And what ends up, it's just kind of like the same way that a coach will be like, hey everybody, come in, like, come in, right? Like, watch this right here. And so if you do that on a recurring basis, it goes from being like, oh no, here's this, like, I'm taking the cat to the vet, versus just kind of like, okay, cool, this is what we do constantly. On the data side, it's like a kind of a similar situation where, you just want to like infuse it. And so this is one of the things that our customers do quite a bit with Atrium, is you just want to make sure that like these metrics are getting in front of people, right? Like the OG version of this is like, the the TVs with the dashboards that everyone like ignores and whatever. Like the more modern version of that is like making sure that that's like getting into people's Slack, getting into people's inboxes, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, like maybe they look at like every other one or every third one or whatever, but what it does is it sets this tone of like, yeah, like that's what we do here, right? Like we are data driven and we have these coaching conversations. So, like those are the actions to kind of like change the culture, to make it such that it just becomes like it's just in the water.
Yeah.
And then like good things happen.
No, and I love that. I'll throw one just like bonus tip on there, y'all. We taught sales math in onboarding, because it's one thing to know what the numbers
I love it.
are. It's actually in onboarding. We not only covered the metrics, what they meant and what impacted them, but I would give assignments based off these numbers. Peter AE, how many opportunities do you need? Based off these numbers, Peter AE, what would your ACV have to come up to in order for you to hit your goal? Based on these numbers, Peter SDR, how many dials did we actually ran math exercises in onboarding, because I think people oftentimes get intimidated by the numbers. Like they see them.
Sure.
Like I can tell you that your close rate's 16%, but if you don't understand what that means, you're like, all right, whatever. So we ran math in the onboarding to make sure they understood how the metrics impacted each other. And that was part of it. If you didn't get it, like you didn't graduate. If you couldn't tell me based off numbers what you needed to do, you were stuck. So we ran that in there. And so, man, we're already at time. We could go on for like 3 more hours on this. But I got one last power question before you can tell people where to learn more about you and Atrium. But like the name of this podcast is Live Better, Sell Better. Because I also have this weird idea that if we lived better, if we were happier, if we had more fulfillment, if we took better care of ourselves, that the sales would also improve. What would your live better advice be for people listening?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I think I struggle a little bit with that myself as kind of like a bit of a workaholic. I think probably the live better thing would be around, like kind of that coaching. It's related to like the coaching conversation and being kind of receptive to feedback. I think it's like extending that throughout kind of like the rest of your life as well, I think is really effective. Like a lot of the times, like as sellers, I was talking with one of my SDRs I took out to beers last night, and as sellers, we're like professional communicators, and one of the things, and like those behaviors are really impactful, like even outside of our commercial interactions. And so one of the things that I tell our staff to do is that they can like practice their sales chops like day to day, right? So like one of my favorite games to play is I call it speed rapport. And it's like how quickly can I become friends with this bartender? How quickly can I become friends with this flight attendant or what have you? Because usually, especially in those situations where like those people are, having they're in like high stress, high stress professions. Maybe people are like not nice to them, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you can infuse the rest of your life with these behaviors that like you need to get better at in your professional capacity, then that can be great, because like then you're always practicing. And the same is true around kind of like getting feedback, asking for it, and like and being a like being good receivers of coaching feedback. So as a rep, you can do that in your like in your day to day. Make sure that you're not being like negatively reactive to feedback that's like showing up in the world. And then moreover, as like as a manager, you can practice that in the rest of your life as well. Like, are you doing a good job coaching with like your friends and what have you? which sounds a little weird, like I'm coaching my friends. It's like, yeah, but you actually are, right? Because like you see your friends engaging in like, this, that, or the other thing, and like maybe there's an opportunity for them to change their behavior. And so can you deliver that, commentary in a way that like is it like they're going to receive it and they're going to appreciate it, and so on and so forth. So I would say that just kind of like infusing the rest of your life with these things can make you really can make you live better as well.
And I love it because it's a different angle, right? It's like we talk about the things that make us great professionally can also make us great personally, right? Asking the great questions, being intentional, listening, doing proper discovery, like all of those things. So Peter, my man, this was exactly what I was hoping it would be. And then some. We definitely got to do a part 2 because there's still so much we can unpack here. But where can people learn more about you, Atrium, like resources around here? Where can people get more of what y'all are putting out?
Yeah, I mean, if folks are interested in getting more data driven, I mean, Atrium is a great place to start. Takes 3 minutes to set up an Atrium account, a free Atrium account. You just go to atriumhq.com and you just sign in with your Salesforce credentials there, and you're like within 5 minutes you're on your merry way with a world class metrics harness there. And then you guys can just like find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm the only Peter Kazanjy in the United States. So, and by the way, don't worry about like spelling it right because Google will autocorrect it for you. So it's all good.
Mind you. So I love it, my man. I appreciate you, dude. This was so good, man. Thank you for the insights and energy today. We'll be in touch for sure.